Welcome back to another episode of Unscripted. My name is Emily Roska and I'm the managing editor at The Phoenix.
And I'm Lucas Neighbor, and I'm a film writer at The Phoenix.
In this week's episode, we are reviewing Parasite, which came out last Friday and is directed by famed Korean filmmaker Bong Joon-ho.
부자인데 착하다니까. 진짜 니가 착한 거지. I'm deadly serious.
근데 지금 진짜로 이상한 게 뭔 것 같아.
So Parasite follows two Korean families, both on opposite ends of the wealth spectrum. We have the Park family, who are wealthy beyond belief. They live in a house designed by a famous architect, and they have tutors for their kids, housekeepers, drivers, and they really worry about nothing except like their kids' happiness and getting what they want, right? And then on the opposite end, we have the Kim family, who live in like a basement of, I'm not even sure what it is exactly.
It's like a basement apartment, within the city limits, and it's like very clear that the Parks live like right outside the city.
So both families have four people, so they're kind of living parallel lives. The Kim family, the two kids work like whatever jobs they can pick up, like folding pizza boxes, I think is one of them, like anything that they can like do to make some money. And then the Park family, it's really only the father who works. He like is the CEO of a company, so they're very clearly well off. And so the whole film really is based on that idea of wealth and desperation, I would say.
Yeah, I think it gets to like a lot of things about like the wealth disparity. Like, there's something to be said for I wouldn't say every movie that Bong Joon-ho's done, but most of his movies like deal with specifically like South Korean wealth disparity, like in some way. Like, it's very much a part of what he does, and so people that are poor, like impoverished, like are very big parts of a lot of his movies, and he never uses it as like a thing to get us to feel bad for them, or like even, you know, a thing that makes them endearing to us. Like, it's just sort of presented as who they are, and then the dynamics like of the characters are what he uses to get us to sympathize. Like, he puts it on screen, but he doesn't pass judgment on it. He just like lets it stand for itself, and Parasite's definitely not an exception.
It's like this dark satire, and you told me before I went to see it, like, don't read any synopsis, don't watch the trailer. I only saw...
So watch our spoiler video of Unscripted.
Well, I mean, if you saw the movie, this is ideal, or if you really don't care, then
That's fair.
like any movie review, right?
Unscripted markets to the people that don't care. That's our target audience, so.
Yeah. I went in, like I do with a lot of movies, without doing any research. I know vaguely what it's about, and with Parasite, I made sure, per your recommendation, not to do any research on it, so I really went in just knowing that it was going to be like a thriller of sorts. I didn't even know that it was in Korean, with subtitles.
Yeah.
So I did actually really like that. I just love subtitles.
Oh, okay, that's fair.
So I appreciated that.
Subtitles are good, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it starts with Ki-woo, who is the son of the Kim family. He's they don't really specify his age, but he's like a teenager, maybe like close to 20, you know, around like college age, and he gets a job from his friend who leaves to go to America.
I think so. He was recommended.
Yeah, well, yeah, his friend like gets him an interview to take over his job tutoring for the Park family, their daughter Dahai. And so Ki-woo goes and he does the interview, and they don't really address this until after he gets the job. But one thing that I thought was interesting was like, he seems like he actually does a really good job.
With the tutoring?
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting to see that, like, you know, what happens is Ki-woo gets hired as the tutor because he impresses Yoon Kyo, who's the mother of the Park family, and after he gets the job, he slowly finds jobs for his parents and his sister to take.
But it's not
working
even
for the
finding
parks.
jobs, it's getting the people who
Right,
work
right.
there fired to hire.
Right, but like finding jobs is in like he notices what they could do to like find a way in. Like I think it's interesting that Kiwoo like actually does the job in front of her and gets hired, and then it's also present with Ki-taek, the dad. He's a good driver. Like he's an unemployed driver, and he gets the job driving, and he gets complimented on his cornering, and he doesn't spill the dad's coffee. That's Dong Eek's coffee. They pretty much they get the jobs, and it's obviously through nefarious purposes. Like they lie, fake names, fake identities for each other, and so everyone's hired on a recommendation, but the parks don't know that it's a family that they've hired, and they don't know that. Evidently, they don't know that it's like a very poor family, and there's like even references that Dong Eek makes to the smell of the family, like
That's ultimately what like triggered the dad at the end of the movie.
kind of, yeah, because it was the song that mentions like they all smell the same, and then
What does he describe them as? It's like when you boil a rag.
yeah, it's
What's
when you
one?
boil a dirty rag, or
And, the smell of radishes.
yeah, that's right. And it's like really, interesting to see how the Kims like compliment the parks throughout all of this. And the parks seem pretty happy with the services that the Kims, give them. And it's interesting to see how what Bong Joon-ho's kind of doing with it is he's sort of showing the microaggressions, I think, of like a society that's based around class. It's just interesting to see, the comments that he hears and like the things that, as you said, like sow the seeds kind of for the climax, like they're never intended to harm. Like he doesn't even mean to pass judgment. He just like has trouble dealing with the smell when he's in the car. And you can see that like Ki-taek, like it's obviously wrong to insult the family smell and specifically his smell, but at the same time he knows that it's a problem and he's ashamed of it, while also knowing that there's nothing he can do about it. So it's like by showing these two families, like it shows how both sides can sort of have plausible deniability in this kind of relationship. Like the poor, the impoverished family, like it's not their fault that they smell bad because of their basement apartment that they can't keep, away from the elements and like can't keep aired out. Like that's not their fault. And it's really not the park's fault that they're bothered by the smell, and they were talking about it in the privacy of their own home. And even like going down to the decision to party there and like lie about the jobs, like they needed the money and the mansion was there and no one's using it and they were gonna clean up. Like everything there's defensible, but
And also the only reason that the Kims even knew about the smell is because they were stuck in the house, like hiding when the Parks came home from their
Yeah.
camping trip, and so they were like hiding under the coffee table when like the husband and wife were like laying on the couch and talking about it. So that's how they heard.
well, but even, yeah, exactly. Like, so it's unintentional. Like they weren't meant to hear it, but even, it's like everything that happens, Bong Joon-ho like is a very sympathetic director, and he's not, he's not trying to alienate anyone. Like that's where I think the idea of like not trying to get you to pick sides comes from. Like I don't think he leaves it up to you to choose sides based on like what occurs in the movie, but he just sort of shows how like both sides think that they're completely in the right and aren't considering the other side's perspective. And it's like obviously the Kims get the raw end of that deal, but it's the park's ignorance that causes this, and like their enjoyment of their lifestyle that leads to the Kims suffering. It's not really an intentional choice, and it sort of shows how it's the system that they're in that's causing these problems. Like it's the class system that's established, not the people's intention.
So the old housekeeper comes back and she looks, it was never, not that it really matters, but it was never established like why she looked all banged up, because she had like bruises on her face and everything. But as she's such clever like camera angles as like how it showed her through the peephole, so it made her face like even rounder, even more like blistered looking. So she ends up coming into the house saying that she forgot something in the basement, and reluctantly Chung-suk lets her in, and she's like, well, do you need help in the basement? And she's like, well, come if you want, which is funny because like why would you have wanted them to know? Well, I guess
Well, how do you
because,
get them out?
well, true, but either way. So they go into the basement and she finds a secret hideout.
Yeah, it's like a bomb shelter slash like a nuclear radiation thing in case something happens with North Korea. Like,
Right.
and I believe I didn't do enough reading on this, but I believe that's like a very common thing for wealthy families to have in South Korea.
Well, I
It's
think
like,
that was addressed in the film.
well, they talk about, yeah, like a lot of wealthy families have them and no one knows they're there. And so it's like the previous owner who sold the family to the Parks just neglected to ever tell them. When she finds out that the architect is moving out of the house, she's been having trouble paying the bills. Her and her husband are not able to find somewhere to live. So she hides her husband in the bomb shelter knowing that the Parks won't be made aware of his presence there.
Or the existence of that shelter.
Right. They just have no idea that it's there. They think it's, just a garage.
That's kind of where the movie, the pristine, no smudge glass, cracks. When I think when the housekeeper comes back and they find out about the husband in the shelter, because then they break out into fights, and there's the threats to tell the Park family, and then they end up upstairs, and their perfect night of drinking whiskey and making a mess in the living room is interrupted by that, and then it all goes downhill from there.
It's kind of like there's two different movies going on, and that's kind of the point where they intersect, and then they're kind of the same movie. It's like you have the Parks kind of, I don't know, South Korean Downton Abbey, social problems, and let's set up this party and our kids need tutoring, whatever. It's interesting enough because Bong Joon-ho's a great writer and director, and they're very endearing characters, but it's really not, the point. The point is the Kim story, and it's they only appear in the Park story when the Parks need food made, or they need to be driven to the grocery store or anything like that. The Kims have this whole dramatic rise from poverty to having jobs, and their scheme working out, and the tension of being found out, and the whole time the Parks just don't care. And so Bong Joon-ho, I think it goes in with this sort of idea that we're not complicit in the system that we participate in. I don't think he buys that, and so it's interesting how he sort of knows that he can't have the rich family just find out, because that just ends with them firing the family, and that's not a movie. So it's instead of putting the initiative on the Parks to have some forward action and do something with the plot, he introduces another impoverished family, and he shows how these two families that really should be trying to coexist, they should be trying to coordinate food and trying to live off of the Parks'
and I
wealth.
thought that's what was going to happen. Why wouldn't you help them out? Because they each had ammunition on the other. So I was like, this is how it should go. But
exactly,
they didn't, I guess, for movie watching sake.
Well, and I think it's for the sake of the metaphor. Bong Joon-ho's saying here we are looking at this perfect mansion with way too much food for the people who live in it. They're usually never there. The kids don't care. There is enough for all of you to thrive in there, and it's really not a problem until two families decide that they both want to be supported by the richer family, instead of it being some kind of symbiotic relationship without even, the rich people having to know, and that's where obviously it's narrative, but it could have happened, and it really does make sense in the plots of the movie. It's people complain about irrational characters, but it makes sense they sort of lose it, and Bong Joon-ho knows that putting those two together, that proves his point, the whole time, and we should just really quick wrap up what happens. There's a couple murder sprees in the end.
Well, and I thought I loved that it was on the son's birthday again.
Yeah.
Because he was traumatized at 3 years old, 7 years old, I don't remember, by I don't know the family's name, but the old housekeeper's husband.
Yeah, her husband had been living down there.
Such a creepy scene when he just appeared out of
So
the basement.
good.
It's just his eyes.
Yeah, and
that
even speaks to it too, because he's been traumatized from this for years, and no one knew what it was. Yeah, and probably it's never specified, but no one made the connection, even the son, when he came back out.
No.
That's only there for the viewers. So it's he'll be traumatized again from this, but Dong-ik, the father of the Park family, gets stabbed.
It's a whole war zone between the two families, the ones that they know of each other, let's say, and then there's the husband of the old housekeeper who survived because the other one didn't. She died. The housekeeper ultimately, but he comes out of his cellar, his hiding spot.
It's such a complex
It's
plot.
so
We
complicated.
missed multiple details.
I think
but
the most important part is it happens on the son's birthday again, and obviously it's gonna happen on the son's birthday because that's when he was traumatized the first time around by the same man who ultimately starts this entire thing now. And it's this pristine, like, all-white attire, garden party set up, like, the day of. Everyone's called into work to quickly, like, do their jobs, and it's a party for their son. And it does end in, like, a murder spree.
Yeah, so the husband who's been living under the house for a decade, 11 years, something like that, comes out and he's furious at the Kim family due to the death of his wife earlier, which we glossed over. Since we're assuming you've seen the movie or you don't care, it shouldn't matter. Basically, what occurs is, he goes on like a stabbing spree trying to kill the Kim family, and obviously everyone's involved in it. All the park's party guests and everything run out, and but what I think is probably the most, obviously, I mean, it's the driving action of the plot. Like, the most important thing is, everything sort of died down when Ki-taek decides to stab Dong-ik,
When, and like I mentioned earlier, like, the reason that happened was because he was triggered when he made, like, he made a face about the smell of the man that was in the basement, because he had that same kind of, like, slight reek. And so when he saw that, he, like, joined
It was like
this fight.
And
Well, after it all dies down, the parks they all end up in the emergency room, and
Ki-taek ends up in the bunker, and I think that's really important because it's like, after everything that happens, after this big, like, final stand against, the rich, like, at the end of the day, the only refuge that he has is to just go back into their shelter and, like, hide from the outside world and live off their resources.
a new family's resources.
Sure, yeah, because obviously the parks don't continue to stay in their murder house. It's interesting because the whole time, like, I feel like there's these little hints at, like, a horror movie that never happens throughout that movie. Like, visually, yeah, it's like a horror movie visually, the pastel colors and, like, the way that it's in shadows and just the way that they photograph the house. But for me, like, there's stuff with, like, the conflicts going outside when they're driving around, and, like, the inexplicable, like, beat up, like, swelling nature of the housekeeper's face when she comes back to get her husband. Like, there's all these things that aren't really explained, and they just kind of make you on edge the whole time. It's like, it's also
Even,
the
like,
stuff that's...
the Park family, like the husband and the wife.
Yeah.
Like, there's some tension between them that, like, I was at least wondering about.
Yeah, and there's, like, Dong-ik's, like, not very present. He's, like, a workaholic. It's, like, there's just a lot of threads there, and Bong Joon-ho, like, doesn't have to pull them all, so he just doesn't. But he's really good at knowing which ones to, like, leave so that you're just, like, a little bit unsettled, or, like, in other movies, like, sometimes, like, the threads are just really funny things that you didn't think about, but it's, like, he always...
And there are a lot of comedic elements.
Oh, it's a really funny movie, yeah. It's like other directors mix humor and, like, tragedy, but Bong Joon-ho just kind of throws everything into all of his movies all at once, and it just seems to work better. It's just, like, an authentic viewing experience.
I know saying this, like, with you in the room means, like, nothing, considering how many movies you watch, but this was definitely, for me, like, probably the best movie I've seen this year.
I think it's my favorite of the year so far, but yeah, it's really good.
That was our review of Parasite. Thank you guys for watching, and if you want to see past episodes from last season or previous episodes of this season, they're all on the Loyola Phoenix webpage under Media or under A&E and the Unscripted tab. So we will see you guys next time. Thank you.